Yesterday was probably one of the worst days I have ever endured, and it all started with a phone call at about 7 a.m. I picked up my phone to see who was calling me so early, but since I didn't recognize the number, I just put it on silent and fell back asleep. When I woke up again 3 hours later, I saw that I had 12 missed calls and 8 voicemails. Panic started to set in as I thought something horrible had happened to a family member. As I looked at all the missing numbers, though, I realized that I didn't know who any of them were. I thought that was really strange, since if something bad had happened to a family member, I should at least recognize one of the numbers. Then things only got weirder as I heard the first voicemail. "Hi, I was just giving a call about the house you have for sale. I saw the Craigslist ad and was hoping to figure out a time that I could be given a walkthrough. Just give me a call back at... Thanks." I figured that it was a wrong number and played the next voicemail. "Yeah, hi. I was calling about the house for sale on Craigslist. If you could give me a call back, I'd really like to know some more about those murders before I take a walkthrough. Thanks, and have a nice day." After hearing the second voicemail, I was really starting to wonder what the hell was going on. The other 6 voicemails were all pretty much the same, inquiring about setting up a walkthrough and wanting to know about the murders. After I finished listening to the last one, I needed to find out what the fuck was going on. I called the last number to leave a voicemail, and a woman answered. When I asked her about the house she was calling about, she said there was an ad on Craigslist offering a house for dirt cheap. But it was only so cheap because the post said that a couple had been murdered in the house. I asked her if she could text me the link, and she assured me that she would. About 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed, and I saw her number pop up on its screen. I had no idea what was in store for me by clicking on that link. When the web page opened, the coldest chill I have ever felt shot down my spine. What I saw was a picture of my house on a Craigslist for sale ad. What made it worse was that the pictures had been taken within the last week. You could see the pumpkin that I had carved last week. Then I read the posting description. "I have this sweet little home I am putting up for sale. It is located in the town of Lancashire, just a hop, skip, and jump away from the city. Enjoy all the seclusion and privacy that this house will bring you. My asking price is $25,000. Disclosure: there is a reason I am asking basically nothing for this house. The precious couple who lived there, a young man and woman, were murdered in the house a year ago. I figured I would get it out in the open now, so that I'm only contacted by people who are not bothered by this. Don't let this little mishap dissuade you, though. The neighborhood is very safe, I promise. You can call me, my name is listed, at any time, day or night. I never sleep, and we can set a time to take a walk through of the house. My number is..." I felt like I had been socked in the gut. What the fuck was going on? How did they know my number, my name? I immediately called my girlfriend over to see. I could see the horror set in on her face as she looked at the ad. I didn't think I could feel any worse until she pointed out how our car was in the picture. We were in the house when someone took these pictures. I immediately called the police to figure out what the hell to do. They informed me that I should immediately contact Craigslist to remove the posting. Other than that, there was really nothing else they could do at the moment. The only crime that had technically been committed would be trespassing. But since whoever took the pictures wasn't on our property anymore, they couldn't do anything else. I am freaking the fuck out, guys. My girlfriend was on the phone with her mom in hysterics for most of the day yesterday. Today, we've just been on constant alert. Every sound we hear makes us jump. I think the worst part is, there's really nothing I can do. I feel so violated and so helpless. At the best onset, it'll be quite a while before we feel safe in our own home again. At the worst, there's someone coming to kill us. I had never heard of the term skinwalker before I arrived in New Mexico. I was sent to New Mexico for work. I spent around 2 months there before heading back to Nebraska for a new assignment. I kept to myself, never really spent time around the area. Occasionally I would hear the men working with me complain about noises at night keeping them awake. I didn't care for scary stories, and I didn't care about what was outside as long as it didn't mess with my sleep. The men seemed to enjoy the creepy stories from the locals and would kill time talking about what they heard that day. At first, it was all fun and games. The men would talk about paranormal sightings. Not having lived through anything like that made it intriguing. However, it wasn't until one of them didn't show up for work that made the rest of the team start taking the stories a little more seriously. One of the men was found hiding in his trailer. I didn't see him personally, but the team was told that he would be sent to a nearby hospital. One of the guys that found him told us that he was huddled up in a small corner, mumbling to himself over and over. I felt bad for the guy. The stress from work was probably getting to him, in my opinion. However, the other men started to get worked up. One night, I went over to the local bar and found 3 other guys talking to the bartender about the possibility of something paranormal happening back at camp. The bartender wasn't too happy about the guys bringing out folklore they knew nothing about, and occasionally left to serve others, trying his best to ignore the 3 men. One of the men started talking about skinwalkers, while the rest listened closely. They had all had a few drinks in them, and were getting pretty loud. Everyone at the bar started to look at them annoyed at how obnoxious they were acting. I was looking around thinking how stupid the men were, when I noticed an older man dressed in farmer's attire with some Native American print on who was also listening closely. The man looked angry and approached the group very slowly before standing behind them, not saying a word. One of the men from my team looked at him and asked him what he wanted. The old man didn't respond and just stared at him. I stood up from my table, hoping that none of the drunks would be dumb enough to start a fight with an old man. The old man stood there looking at them while the men started taunting him. Eventually, the 3 got bored and turned their back on him. The subject of skinwalkers came up again, which is when the old man finally spoke. "Stop talking about something you know nothing about." The men turned around and stood up. I moved closer in hopes that they would see me and back off from the old man. The old man stood his ground and told them not to be disrespectful and to not meddle in things that were past their understanding. The men got irritated, and right as one was about to step closer to the old man, I finally butted in. Being somewhat their superior, the 3 men finally left, leaving me and the old man behind shaking our heads. I apologized and told him that they were just a bunch of immature kids that didn't know how to handle their alcohol, when the old man told me to be careful. He said that the locals didn't talk about that subject, and that talking about them would only bring unwanted attention. Not wanting to be rude, I only nodded and told the old man I'd keep an eye on my team. I returned to camp and saw one of the men from the bar asleep on a chair in front of his trailer, holding a beer. I didn't care to leave him out there. I went straight to bed. It must have been around 3 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of men outside yelling. I got up and walked out, still somewhat half asleep, to find everyone standing around something. I walked up, only to become overwhelmed by a rotting stench and the horrific sight of the man who was asleep, dead, with his throat slashed. He had taken his life with a shard of the broken beer bottle. I walked away, sick to my stomach, while everyone stayed behind. I walked up a small path, feeling sick, and puked. When I was finished and was about to walk back, I heard something behind me. When I turned around, the darkness didn't allow me to get a good look up ahead, but I was able to make out someone standing not too far from me. I thought it was perhaps one of the men, who also had to excuse themselves from the crowd. However, the person up ahead was moving funny. I called out for the person to identify himself, however, heard no immediate response. The person was walking closer, very slowly, and his body was jerking funny. He looked like a child learning how to walk. I called out once again for the person to identify himself, only this time there was a response. The voice of the person sent chills up my spine. The voice sounded inhuman, yet tried to sound as normal as possible. The body was twitching, which is what really frightened me. I started to step back, still deciding what to do, when it spoke again. The words didn't make sense, and I couldn't understand what he was trying to say. It wasn't until he walked up and the moonlight hit his face when I realized it wasn't a him, but an it. The body was a mesh of what had been Carl, the man who I had just seen dead moments ago, and something goat-like. The skin looked stretched out, and the face looked like a mask. Its legs looked broken, and the feet, they weren't feet. They were hooves. I ran out of there quick, looking back in hopes that it wasn't following me. Everyone was so focused on the body that they didn't notice me running into my trailer. I made a call to the local sheriff, who was already on his way after the call for Carl's death was made. I sat in my trailer, not knowing what to think, or say, or do. I waited until the sheriff arrived before going out. After Carl's death, a huge lawsuit was filed against our company for not finishing the job. However, no one would go back to work after a few more sightings of something inhuman emerged. I was one of the first men who was packed up and ready to go. I visited the local bar one last time in hopes of finding the old man I had spoken to before. I found him in the same spot, sitting and drinking. Before I even said another word, he started to speak. I warned them. You can't go around talking about stuff like that and not expect anything to happen. I didn't say anything, and asked him what I wanted to ask. Did he really take his own life, or was it a skinwalker? The old man looked up and said in a very serious tone, "Don't talk about them. The talk will attract their attention." He got up and left without saying another word. That was the last time I ever said the word out loud. Okay, so here are the events that have transpired in the past 2 hours or so, and a little backstory as to why this is freaking me out so much. My fiancé and I have recently moved back into my childhood home with my parents, while our own house is being built to save some cash and not have to move instantly from our rental when it's complete. My parents own 3 Australian native birds, and earlier tonight I was updating my Snapchat story to show my friends, as many of them always ask what the birds' names are and what they look like. I took 3 Snapchat videos, one after the other, and just put them on my story without worrying about retakes or what I looked like. Anyway, within about 15 minutes of uploading, I received a text message from one of my good, but not great friends that said, "You bearded beast, those birds are mad. By the way, the fuck was that in the window behind you in the last one?" I had no idea what he was going on about, so I went and watched my own Snapchat story a couple times. On the 3rd or 4th watch, I saw what he was talking about, and my stomach sank, and I almost started to have a panic attack, and I am still pretty shaken up. I immediately saved my story videos and put them onto my computer to see them bigger. In the last Snapchat video I sent, it kind of looks like someone is at the door, looking in, with their hands cupped against the door. It is hard to tell because Snapchat videos are very poor quality, and the door is only in the frame for probably 1 second. Whatever is in the 3rd Snapchat video, however, is definitely not in the first video when the door is in full view. I was the only person home at the time, and that particular door leads to the backyard, which is only accessible via a single locked gate. To add some backstory as to why this has me freaking out so much, to do that, I have to quickly talk about my childhood teenage years up until I moved out with my partner in 2009. From about age 8 until 10, I had episodes of sleep paralysis, 1 or 2 times a month, where it felt like a weight was sitting on my chest, and I could not breathe for about 40 seconds at a time. This led to insomnia and anxiety about bedtime, as I dreaded feeling helpless. I ended up seeing a child psychologist, and whether that was or was not the reason, the episodes largely went away, only once or twice a year until age 13. At age 12 or 13, for seemingly no reason at all, I started to get chronic episodes almost every night that lasted minutes to tens of minutes at a time. During these episodes, I could breathe, but could not move. The worst thing about these episodes, however, is that I felt like something was in the room with me and meant me harm. Common for people who experience sleep paralysis, I know. At roughly age 14, things really took a turn, and I started to hear and see things during maybe 1 in 10 of my episodes. The things I heard were never too crazy and over the top, and were usually just thuds and creaks. However, when it came to seeing things, there was always one reoccurring thing. A faceless person looking into my bedroom window with their hands cupped to the glass. For the course of a 1 to 10 minute episode, this person would just stand there and look at me. Whenever the episode ended, the person would just be gone. Over the course of 4 years, this occurred quite regularly, but it always really made me feel totally helpless and terrified. I never got used to it. When I moved out at age 18, I never had another episode where I saw anything. I'm 26 years old now, and I very, very occasionally have a small 30-second episode, but only those in which I feel heavy-chested. Now I say all that to say this. Whatever is there in my Snapchat video looks almost 100% like what I used to see as a teenager during my sleep paralysis episodes, and I've been a nervous wreck all night over it. To me, it kind of looks like a face to the glass, 2 hands on either side. It has scared the Christ out of me. Can anyone help me? I work the morning shift for emergency dispatch in a very small, rural county. I'm new to the area, and thus the job. Last week, my closest friend was getting off the overnight and was spooked about a call they'd taken. He didn't hear any of it until the very end. Apparently, they were only able to record our end of the call. The caller's part was transcribed from memory by the operator and supervisor on duty. They've been very quiet about all of this, but that's not uncommon for any calls we get. Because he's been unable to shake it off, my friend was able to sneak a copy of the transcript for me. Now I'm just as weirded out. If anyone has any explanations for any of this, it would make us feel a little bit better. Caller. Somebody, I need help. I'm lost and homeless, and my dad is, well, I think I know where he is, but... Operator. Okay, calm down. And caller. Okay, my name is Natalie. My name is Salvador, and we're from Pennsylvania. We boarded a train at Union Station, Pittsburgh. Operator. Natalie, what's your emergency? Caller. Everything was okay. We were going to Cincinnati. I fell asleep, and I woke up at night, and we were switching trains. Daddy was mad because he said we were in Detroit, and that's nowhere near Cincinnati, but the men there kept saying to sit down, to wait. I was still tired. Everyone was tired and laying down, but I couldn't fall asleep because it was so cold. Operator. Natalie, do you know where you are now? Caller. The men, they must have been worried about people being sick. They kept going around with instruments and sticking them in people's ears and mouths and had little paper cups for everybody to drink out of. My dad was arguing with one of them when they got to me. Operator. Natalie, do you know where you are? Natalie. Caller. They didn't explain what they were looking for, but it only took a second when I went to drink out of the cup. Operator. Do you know what was in the cup, Natalie? Caller. It was real bitter, but the train came, and the man had to hurry to finish, so he didn't notice me spit half of it out. Operator. Do you have any symptoms? Do you feel... Caller. It was so cold, and my teeth were chattering. We all crowded to get in, and the train was so dark inside, but warm. Daddy picked me up, and I just remember barely keeping my eyes open because it was so nice and warm, and I was tired. I remember somebody saying, "Natalie, that's a nice name." I'm Jasper, but I was already half asleep. Operator. Okay, Natalie. Are you still inside the train? Caller. I woke up in the middle of the night, thirsty. My throat was like cotton from that bitter stuff. I was in a really nice bed. I never had sheets like that before. There were a lot of doors. I was trying to find the bathroom, but the first one took me outside. Operator. Is that where you are now? Caller. It wasn't dark this time. It wasn't right. It was so big. So much bigger than a train could be. It was huge. Like I've never been to one. I've seen pictures, though. It's how a ball would be, I guess. And there were tables of food on shiny metal trays and so many people. Everyone dressed nice. Men in suits, women in dresses, like shimmery with veils. Operator. Natalie? Caller. Smelling the food, I realized how hungry I was. I went to the table and picked up some stick with fruit and cheese, and there was the voice again. That's good, it said. I'm glad you're feeling better, Natalie. I looked up and saw a lady in a long black dress, and I dropped the food because she wasn't using her mouth to talk. She just stared at me. Such a pretty name, she said. Operator. Natalie, I need to know where you are. Caller. I looked around and saw everyone was like that, talking without their mouths, all the laughing, so many voices, but they just stared out. Blank faces. A man with a white flower in his suit looked at me, and I heard someone say, I have all the time in the world, Natalie. Operator. Do you know any of the caller? At the bar, I saw my dad. I ran over, and he put his drink down, just turned to me in the stool. Don't worry, he said. You're safe here, Natalie. But he didn't move his mouth, and I started crying. Operator to supervisor. She can't hear us. Caller. The man behind the counter was staring at me, and I couldn't even tell who was talking to me, but someone said, Natalie is such a pretty name. Operator to supervisor. Can we check the connection? Caller. I ran back to our room and hid under my covers, crying until I hurt all over. I thought someone would come in, but no one ever did. I just kept crying until I woke up and I realized the whole thing was a dream, except it wasn't nice. I was in a bunk with hard sheets, and it smelled really bad, like the sweat and the pee. I just sat up and scared to feel for anything in the dark. Operator. Natalie? Caller. Then I heard voices from outside, and I heard the scraping sound. They were opening up the train again. It was still really dark, but I could see the people started coming in. I don't know why. I was just so scared of being in there. I jumped up and pushed through the people and ran as hard as I could out of the station. I know people were yelling behind me, but I didn't stop until I was near the edge of the forest. I don't know why. I just ran. My daddy was still there, but when I turned, I didn't see him, just other people yelling and running toward me. Operator. Natalie, can you hear me? Caller. I just kept going. I don't know how long, hours I guess, until my legs burned and my arms were all scraped up. I fell asleep again in the middle of the forest, freezing. Operator to supervisor. What do you mean we're not connected? Caller. I kept hearing this voice, and I realized I was dreaming, but I was still right there in the forest, just like when I was on the train. I got off the moss under me and started following it. It just kept calling me, Natalie, until I found this big hole in the ground. Nothing down there but dirt and leaves and a girl, 8 years old, I guess. Come down here, Natalie, but her mouth didn't move. Operator. Natalie, where are you calling from? Caller. Ever since then, it doesn't matter where I sleep. I always dream. I'm right where I am, and there's someone calling me into some hole in the ground or some dark closet, they always say. Such a pretty name. Or, I have all the time in the world, Natalie. Operator. Natalie, how are you placing this call? Caller. I don't know where I am. I was in the forest, 2 days, I think, and then I found this town, but no one's here, not for a long time. Even the grocery store, all the fruit and vegetables aren't just rotted, they're dirt. There's some dog and cat bones, but not many, and no people bones either. Operator to supervisor. Not a recording? Caller. I miss my daddy so much. I try to find the train station, but I get lost in the forest and have to come back. There's no one here but me and Jasper. I'm afraid they killed Daddy. Sometimes it's him in dreams, telling me to crawl down the storm drain. But it's not Daddy. It's Jasper. His face doesn't move. Operator. Okay, Natalie. I need you to describe. Caller. I call a different city. Every night, but no one answers. Operator. Natalie, can you still not hear me? Caller. Crying. Operator. Natalie? Caller. I don't want to go to sleep. Operator. Natalie. Caller. Such a